Hi guys, it's Sandy Freshie back with another video in our series about emotions and managing emotions. So in our last video, which I titled Emotions Are Not Personal, we talked about the energetic mechanics behind emotions. And in particular, I wanted to make you aware in that video that emotions feel personal because of the meanings that we attach to it. So we're going to really expand that out. I want to give you some tools that you can begin to use and to play with and to see if they work for you. And also I want to encourage you, if you're not sure about the mechanics of emotions, to go back to the other video, pull out your human design chart and identify whether or not you are emotionally defined, whether or not your emotional solar plexus is defined. And you can get all the information about that in that last video, and I'll post a link to it so that you can get to it easily. But the crux of that we're going to build on today is that the reason that emotions seem so personal, like when you're having an emotional reaction, it seems so personal to you, is because of the meaning that we attach to it, that you attach to it, that I attach to it when we're actually feeling those emotions. And this is the perfect time to begin to work with that concept and to sort of develop some mastery and some skills and some tools to manage emotions at this time of year, because at the date of this recording, we have just gone through Thanksgiving in 2018, American Thanksgiving, and we are heading into the end of the year celebrations with Christmas and Hanukkah and all the other things that happen, Kwanzaa and everything else that happens at the end of the year. You know, it's the time of year where we're tying things up business-wise. There can be a lot of stress in ourselves and people around us. We're probably spending time with people that we don't normally spend time with. Perhaps people that maybe are part of our social circle or our family that we wouldn't necessarily choose to spend a lot of time with. And this is a great time to... It's actually a great playground to begin to observe emotions, and especially how you're filtering emotions, how you're dealing with them, and to gain the skill of making them less personal. So today's video is really about how to make emotions less personal. And if you've been in social settings lately, or if you've been extra emotional yourself because maybe you're going through some extra stress, this is going to be very instrumental in helping you to manage your emotions in a very practical way. So the first thing that I want to give you, or the first thing that the way I want to set the foundation here, is to ask you if you are in a place where when you're having emotions that you identify that you're having emotions. And that may seem kind of strange to some of you, because maybe you're like, well, yeah, sure, I feel, maybe you're really in touch and you do feel it. But sometimes we go unconscious, especially when we're having reactions to things that are triggering, childhood things, or childhood issues, or old wounds that we thought we had had resolved, or even on that deeper collective level, we're going through in our evolution of consciousness right now a phase, or I don't know, we're going through an experience right now, at least this is my interpretation, where emotional triggers can come up because of what we're experiencing from the the culmination in our body of what we inherited through our ancestral line. And that's a conversation for another time, a deeper conversation for another time. But just be aware that as humans, collectively, we're clearing a bunch of stuff. Stress is coming up. We have our day-to-day stress. We have our pressures. And sometimes the emotions really get intensified because of the stress and the pressure that's coming from all aspects of life and of our history and all of that. And if you're watching me, you probably are a healer of some sort or someone who is working on that higher consciousness path. So I just wanted to give you that awareness. In terms of working with that, the first step is to recognize when you're actually in emotions or feeling emotions and what those emotions may be about. But I don't want to say that in that way necessarily, because I don't want you up in your head analyzing it. So sometimes the emotions are under the surface, and sometimes that just feels like you're a little bit off, and sometimes they flare up and you or the other person is getting defensive, or there's an argument and you look back and you go, what happened? And that can happen. The underlying stuff that kind of makes you feel icky can sort of go on longer than it needs to, or those flare-ups can happen also, because there's something that there's some meaning that we've attached to it that needs to just kind of be seen, embraced, and then released. And that's kind of whether you're dealing with the day-to-day stress management, or you're on this path where you're clearing your ancestral history from your cellular structure. It doesn't matter. That's kind of the practical aspect of the foundation of how you can clear these emotional patterns out of your psyche and out of your system, so that they don't seem so personal and keep you from just being and moving as the lightness that you are. Let's put it that way. So the first step, recognize when you're having feelings, and sometimes you got to recognize after the fact. And that's a process in itself. So if you're just starting with, there's something that doesn't feel quite right, or I keep having these explosions or these arguments with people and I don't really quite understand what happened, your first step is to recognize, to get to the point where you're recognizing in the moment that you're experiencing emotions. And that's about identifying, okay, I'm having some strong emotions right now, or I have some emotions that making me feel kind of off or misaligned or depressed or something like that, and identifying it, not trying to ignore it, but accepting it for what it is and feeling it in that moment when you're in it. And sometimes that just takes as much as just saying, I feel whatever it is, taking a deep breath, just feeling it in your body and allowing it to kind of inform you about what it's about. Now, that in and of itself can be really transformative. And then when we add on the next step, this is where you get to kind of get the perspective where you can identify the meaning. So this is where when you identify, you accept it, you acknowledge what you're feeling, you can just take a breath and move away, or maybe go to another room or find some time alone to take a few minutes and put your hand on your heart, however you feel that you can do that, and move away from the intensity or the vibration or the feeling of what you're feeling. And sometimes what helps me with this is to actually feel or imagine or visualize that I'm in a hot air balloon, and this thing that is emotions is down on the ground, and I'm sort of lifting up to get a broader perspective about what that is that I'm experiencing. You can try any number of ways, and I'd love to hear how you do it. So you can put that in the comment box if you like. And when I personally get to that place where I'm up there in that broader perspective, for me, as someone who's not defined emotionally, and if you're not defined emotionally, this is kind of like your extra step, you can ask yourself, is this mine or is it someone else's? Because remember, you take those emotions in and you amplify it. If you are defined emotionally, you can ask yourself, where am I on my emotional wave? Am I down on my emotional wave? Is this part of my cycle of emotional ups and downs? So you get that perspective. For number one, you recognize, then you get that perspective. I get in my hot air balloon. I ask myself, is this mine or is this someone else's? Or I go into my meditation closet sometimes, literally, and ask myself, is this mine or someone else's? And if you're defined, you can ask, is this part of my emotional wave? Where am I on that wave? And then when you get that, we're in that space of more neutrality, you can ask, what meaning am I giving this? And this is where you really want to take a little time to sit with this. And maybe take a journal out and, write down what happened, and then really look at what meaning does this have for you that created this emotion, these feelings that you're having. And a lot of times those meanings have something to do with judgment, like you or the other person or other people involved are terrible people, or there may be some kind of a meaning that's around a belief that you are a victim of some sort, a victim pattern that might even be from your ancestral line that you just sort of carried on. That's another thing that makes it so not personal. Or you may have a pattern, an emotional pattern, reaction pattern around failure. Whatever it is, you can begin to identify it and identify the meaning that you're giving it. Then once you've identified the meaning from this place of neutrality, you can ask yourself, is it true? Do I have the whole story? Is it true? And it could be. It very well could be that you're having these emotions because of something that is really true in your experience, and you must not deny that. But a lot of times also, it might be that you've assumed something that's maybe you don't have all the information, or you've judged yourself in some way. And those types of judgments and assumptions are usually not true. So whether or not it's true, and especially if it is true, you want to ask yourself, how are these emotions serving me? How is this experience serving me? How is the meaning that I'm giving this serving me? And then when you've identified how this is serving you, you can begin to take that clarity and use it to strengthen your value system. You can, if it's not serving you, or if it's serving you in a way that's keeping you in a pattern that's disempowering you, you can choose to let go of it. You can choose to transform it. Any of those things. But you cannot do that until you have first become aware that you're having these emotions. You've removed yourself enough to get perspective, and then you have identified the meaning of them, and identified how they're serving you. And that's what gives you choice at that point of how you're actually going to respond from a place of consciousness rather than a place of being unconscious. So I hope this has helped you. I'd love to hear how you get into a place of neutrality and how you identify the emotions that you're experiencing, and any questions that you may have or comments you have about managing your emotions, managing the way that you filter the emotions of others, and what you may need in terms of understanding going forward. So until the next time, be well.